Hello and welcome back, and today I've decided to discuss the easy, fluffy subject of are Chinese NAS products safe and should you buy them? In the last few years I've kind of increased a lot of the brands that I talk about here on the channel when it comes to network attached storage, and quite a lot of Chinese brands have come into the fold. I remember when I first started this and there was only a handful of proper Chinese NAS brands, and now there's absolutely loads. And I think it's fair to say that in the comment sections of many of my videos, discussion is quite polar, insofar as some people think it's absolutely fine as long as you take normal security precautions that you would with any other product. But there are others out there that inherently think a Chinese NAS is 100% not safe. And that's what today's video is about. We're going to talk about this. We're going to go through the main reasons. 1, why is there so many of them? 2, why are they so damn cheap? 3, why do people like them so much? 4, what are the security implications? And 5, what are the main hurdles long term when it comes to owning a NAS from China? Now, before you take to the comments after watching hardly any of this video or seeing the thumbnail and banging down, I hate Chinese NAS products, I get it, there are going to be people out there that are going to be triggered by this. Please, please, please watch at least half of this video. Read the transcript that YouTube provides to this. Let's have a proper discussion about this, and if you have purchased a Chinese NAS product in the past and you've had negative or positive experiences, also put that in the comments below, because there are going to be some people watching this who are sitting on their budget for their home or business thinking about what to buy, that are going to need real users that have got real data about these products so that they can make an informed decision. So if you're not going to do it for me and the channel, do it for them. But let's talk about these products. Why are Chinese NAS devices becoming so popular? It would be so easy to just point at products like these and go, oh, they're proper cheap, aren't they? That's why everyone loves them. And, I'm not an idiot much. I know that's a big purchasing decision for a lot of users, and price, therefore, is a huge factor. But I don't think it's just about price. I think it's mostly about price, but it's not just about price. To put it into perspective, most of the products here on the table, they're cheap, but not all of them are super cheap. There's a couple of exceptions to the rule. The GMK Tech G8 here. This is a 4 NVMe flash NAS system with an M100 CPU or an M150 even. This is about 150 to 180 nicker. For a 4-bay flash system, that is pretty bloody cheap. But the rest of them are actually only around about 20% cheaper than alternatives in the market from established NAS brands coming out of Taiwan, some coming out of Europe, some coming out of the US there. The majority of these, again, are similar in price, but they are cheaper. So when it comes to a lot of these, what a lot of these products bring that aren't available in the status quo outside of a lot of Chinese NAS products is flexibility. All of these solutions here on the table, for example, you can install a third-party operating system. You can install TrueNAS, install Unraid, install OpenMedia Vault, install Proxmox, or you can use, in some cases, their own operating system that is included with it. Some ones like this Link Plus actually arrive with an Unraid license included as well. But again, that flexibility next to, it has to be said, unique hardware that is just in some cases not available outside of Chinese NAS systems has to be acknowledged there. Some of these are just simply not available from other brands or other countries. Take this. This is the Terramaster F8 Plus. This is an i3 8-core processor NAS here with integrated graphics. It's got 10 GBE. It's got 8 M.2 NVMe slots, and it's about 700 to 800 nicker. It's regularly on sale. You just can't buy that elsewhere. It's got its own software. You can stick TrueNAS on it. So although we have to acknowledge that it's cheap, we also have to acknowledge that there is an element of flexibility and custom hardware on these solutions that's not affordable elsewhere or even available. The other thing worth highlighting, and we touched on it with the software there, is some of these solutions arrive with their own OS and some of them don't. But thanks to custom semi and completely open source operating systems in the market, like the Xianyun, I'm sure I've mispronounced that, is a custom NAS software that many Chinese NAS brands have then added their own peripheral bits and bobs onto to make them semi-closed source. But also it allows some NAS brands in the market to start rolling out turnkey NAS solutions rather than just pre-built with no OS. This amount of flexibility and therefore more Chinese NAS solutions that are arriving with their own custom software and Docker support and container support and more is appealing. Look at brands like Minisforum. Minisforum rocked out the N5 and the N5 Pro, and they're still debating at the time of recording this video whether they want to include their own Sanoyan custom operating system included with it on an individual little storage drive inside, as well as supporting unraid and TrueNAS. So yes, these are popular because of the price. Of course they are. But they're also popular because they bring an element of flexibility that's not afforded in the market right now elsewhere. How are Chinese NAS products so cheap? This is another point I think a lot of users may be very quick to say, well, the reason their products are so cheap is because they work people to bone. They've got no workers' rights, they will make people work 80 hours a week, and I'm not going to say there isn't some merit or truth to that in some cases. We've all watched documentaries about iPhones. Nonetheless, I think that blanket rule cannot apply to all brands. And how can I say that with honesty and knowing that? It's because I've been to China. I've been to different factories there. And although not all the factories I've been to are equally as sound, equally as squeaky clean, I will say that I have visited ones that are in some cases better than some of the ones I've visited in the UK. Now, of course, these are all relative. These are all relative. I mentioned in a previous video, it doesn't matter whether you're a factory in China or you're making box seats in Bolton. Factories are factories and they're not comparable to most other industries. There are checks and balances in place, but it has to be said when it comes to Chinese factories, a lot of the cultural differences and arguably in-house, in-country attitudes towards workers has a huge impact on their output. But moreover than anything, it has to be said that when it comes to a Chinese NAS product, it, like mini PCs, like a lot of computer hardware that comes out of China, a big reason it's cheap is because of vertical integration. Now, that is, in these, at least in this context, that unlike when a product is made in other parts of the world, when components and individual bits have to be brought in, be they raw materials or were they individual components, and I'm not going to talk about tariffs again, we'll talk about that for another video. I will say that when it comes to a lot of these products, everything from the screws to the PCBs to the LEDs to the CPU to the memory to the entire construction is happening locally. And I don't just mean local China, I am saying local Shenzhen, one city full of lots of manufacturing districts where practically every single component, even the retail packaging, is being made in one city. And if you build it within shared production facilities, which by the way can work out against the product, we'll get onto that later on, the result can be that the economies of scale are enormous. Nonetheless, we also have to acknowledge lower wages, larger working hours as well. Some of the people I spoke to in Shenzhen start work at 9 or 10 and finish at 7. So again, you work hard, but nonetheless, I think it isn't just about people having to work longer hours or salaries being lower. Of course, they make a difference. Let's not be naive, but that vertical integration and all of it being done in one city almost makes a huge impact on the pricing differential. Why does everyone think Chinese NAS products are inherently unsafe? Let's be honest, besides support, security is the biggest barrier for a lot of users considering a Chinese NAS product to store their data. Not just because a NAS is a glorified hard drive, but because a NAS has that network access, has, if you don't set it up right, insecure remote access, and in some cases not down to you if it's set up wrong or if it's been set in an unsecure way, because sometimes a product can come off production with a sneaky little treat inside. That sneaky little treat opens back doors. That sneaky little treat can mean that you have a system that has malware, that has ransomware, that has the means for data to be retrieved or data to be harvested there. Now, these are extreme examples, and in very, very few cases is a NAS product rolled out that is designed to destroy your data and destroy the remaining system. There is no long-term profitability in that. But the extraction of data, that's a different story. And that's something, unfortunately, that, in the last 5, 6, 7 years has been something of a problem. Now, we could talk about US-China trade war. We could talk about security incidents like those that were caused by Huawei and those were then followed up and connected to brands like Hikvision and more. It's the reason why a lot of products coming out of Taiwan needed to be NDAA and TAA certified to allow them to be used within government contracts, to be used within any kind of official capacity there. Alongside that, a lot of products that are done on limited runs or production runs where the margins are so incredibly thin, sometimes, and again, we've never seen the clear process of this, but we've definitely seen the outcome where products have rolled out, Ace Magician being a great example, or Ace Magic, when products have rolled out that had virus, malware, call it what you will, built in and hard-baked into the hardware, hard-baked into the or soft-baked into the software, some of those Windows licenses you've got there. Now, again, this has been reported on numerous occasions, and although it's been a cluster of different brands affected, what you generally found was a lot of the mini PCs, the cheaper they were, because the margins were very thin, whether it was the brand themselves that acquiesced into it, or somewhere in the production facility, money changed hands and this software was injected one way or another into the system, was something to be factored in. Now, not all Chinese brands have been impacted by this, but there's no denying that alongside a lot of accusations of people about connections directly or indirectly, and of course formally and nationally connected to the CCP, Chinese Communist or CCNP or CCP, the result is that a lot of Chinese NAS products are treated like they are insecure. And whether we could say it's a handful of bad apples or it's systemic, we simply do not have the statistics from a reliable source. And by a reliable source, I mean, you're never going to hear a Chinese company say, yes, we put ransomware on there. And you're never going to hear anything. UK, larger parts of Europe even, America, Canada, Australia, any of them are going to have reliable statistics that represent the globe. Nevertheless, there have definitely been plenty of bad apples are isolated and recognised in the wild enough to give people concerns about security of some of these products. And I'm going to touch on this more at the end of the video, but this is why I generally will not recommend a NAS brand unless I either know or have got at least decent enough confirmation that they have their own production facility. If they don't have their own production facility, that can also lead to products during production having some of these nasty little Easter eggs injected into them during the production process, actually baked into some of the controllers as well. So do keep that in mind. Now, I mentioned shared production facilities. That's because some companies that don't have their own in-house production, the result can be that they're using shared production facilities, and therefore it's not even the brand themselves that might be culpable or responsible for insecure software being injected into the system, but an errant employee, a production manager that's slipping it in to maybe the next 5,000 units. So again, double check the brand you're working with. If you are going to buy a Chinese NAS product, have their own production facility. And indeed, you can remove the word China from that, or China or Chinese from that statement, because I would argue any country that runs a production on a shared production line of any kind of technological instance, they aren't 100% nailed down at the beginning and the end of that production, and therefore any vulnerability or any injection of, let's say, a vulnerable situation could be put into any of those devices easily. And even those of you that aren't going to rely on the software or the hardware here, and you're going to nail things down with a VPN, you're going to nail things down with your own software, I will say, if you're going to establish remote access to a lot of these systems, even ones like Ugreen, Terramaster, Z-Labs, any of these brands that provide their own remote access portals to get through to their NASes, because some of them use third parties, I would always say if you're going to remote access any of these NAS devices and you are concerned about how encrypted pathways of your data going up and down are going to be handled by relay servers, your authentication into some of those applications, and therefore the doorway you may be opening into your local area network, use trusted and well-established VPN services or remote access protocols. Things like Tailscale, things like Zero Tier, things like WireGuard. Use OpenVPN supported services. All of these will reliably allow you to access the system in a really, truly anonymized fashion. And because they're only being used as relay servers, and the SSL certificate and the encrypted portals that they're utilizing ensure that even the access methodology and the access credentials are anonymized, it means lesser chance of that data being intercepted. And of course, with any NAS product, have a bloody backup in place. why is support such a problem with a lot of Chinese NAS products? As mentioned, alongside security, the other issue a lot of people have when it comes to buying a Chinese NAS product is to do with support. They've bought the product and maybe they need a helping hand. Maybe the product they've received isn't working, or at the least it's not working the way they said it would. Why is it a problem for some brands when it comes to support? Well, probably one of the biggest issues is regional support. Now, I don't mean regional support is this product in my language? I mean, if you are based in the US and you find a problem with your solution, you could go to the e-tailer you purchased it from, but chances are, if it's a technical issue, they're not going to be able to help you, and you want to go straight to the brand. And it has to be said that trying to get direct contact information for some Chinese brands can be a real headache for some users in the US and in Europe. Now, again, I could say the rest of the world there, but generally I seem to find that if you are based in Europe and the US, that is where the problems generally are. Whether it is a contact number, whether it is that the email addresses that they're trying to contact you on, when they respond to you, there could be blacklisting of a lot of email servers that are being used. That's why you tend to find even some of these brands that have got millions of dollars of turnover still have to use Gmail accounts. And even then, some of those still require VPNs to access them there. But not having regional offices on site can be problematic. Now, there are options like Terramaster and Ugreen here who have regional offices. Ugreen especially have got more global coverage for end user support and technical support and more than some of the other Chinese brands I've spoken about. It doesn't necessarily have to be a deal breaker, and I do know a few Chinese brands, again like Terramaster and Aoostar as well, who have multilingual support coordination in their home country and 24/7 support in some cases, included with the purchase of a product. But some Chinese products arrive with only 1 year of warranty, some even 6 months, which is not good for a device that's designed to be on 24/7. But then you've also got tech culture and language barriers. Now, I mentioned tech culture. That's really important because the general standard of technical knowledge and tinkering with it yourself is very different out in the East than you generally find in the West. Now, what do I mean by that? Have you been to an airport in the East, Taiwan, China, passing through Hong Kong? If you look at any of those airports, they've got advertisements for graphics cards and CPUs and RAM on the trolleys at the airport. Now, when you go to Gatwick or Heathrow, you might be lucky and see a phone or see a tablet being advertised. That gives you some understanding about the general understanding and tech know-how of the average punter. Now, when it comes to a lot of the support you find with Chinese NAS brands, particularly the smaller ones and lesser so the big ones, is that cultural tech understanding difference means that when you provide information, they might give you very, very tricksy or more complicated suggestions for resolution. Tapping with SSH, they say, going with Windows PowerShell, and some of you are not really prepared to do so. And then you will quickly want to go to send me a brand new one now. And that is where barriers start to come up. Notwithstanding, supplying products internationally is subject to quite a lot of tariffs and taxes. Let's not talk about that again. But on top of that, when it comes to how much time it will take for replacement parts and just generally the profit margin for any brand that's trying to provide support can often lead to support perhaps not being great. And therefore, these smaller brands that I've talked about before, if it came to a support query, they're almost certainly going to either send you a brand new one or just say, here's $100, please stop talking to us. And I do not endorse that for a 24/7 NAS product there. But worse still, going back to my point about shared production facilities and a lot of these brands, sometimes the brand that you're talking to didn't even make the stuff. This is a CWWK MITX motherboard here. Again, I reviewed it on the channel a while ago. I reviewed quite a lot of CWWK products, and since visiting their production facility and seeing a lot of their blueprints and a lot of their R&D and their roadmap, I'm pretty confident that not only do they design their products in-house, but they are designing and producing the products in-house. However, they have a crap load of contractors. They have loads of subdivisions. By subdivisions, I should say, not official, but these are people that buy a lot of product from them and then repackage that product. The result is that often you will buy a NAS product and they can't help because they're not making the product. They don't have the components. They're on board. And that can often lead to, when you do buy a NAS product, that they can't support you anyway, even if they wanted to. So if you are going to buy a Chinese NAS product and you are concerned, I'm going to say right now, there aren't a huge number of brands that I'm prepared to personally endorse. I would endorse Minisforum. I would endorse Ugreen. I would endorse Terramaster. I would endorse Icewhale. I would endorse those, certainly. I would endorse Aoostar, for that matter, as well. Link Plus have produced some pretty solid NAS products and have quite a good support history there. Then again, in the DIY space, I would recommend CWWK, not just because they seem to be making a lot of the product originally before it gets rebadged and renamed afterwards by other brands from that point, but also because their production facilities, I could clearly see repairs, clearly see them doing support queries with users. Am I going to say they're perfect? God, no, I don't know that much about them to make a judgment call of that magnitude. But I will say, in the whole Topton versus CWWK debate, I would go CWWK. And moreover from that, if you're looking at a DIY NAS product and it is a turnkey NAS solution, I would still say right now, Ugreen, Terramaster, they're kind of the go-to ones there when it comes to turnkey, because their software, at the very least, has got a decent amount of work going into it at the beginning and the end. Although, frankly, the Terramaster one is more feature-rich, the Ugreen one seems to feel more stable. Bottom line, a video like this is going to have detractors. There is no one brand that is perfect, and certainly there is no one country when it comes to any product that is perfect. Ultimately, as a consumer, you've got to weigh up the pros and cons, and you have to work out, one, the savings that you might make, are they worth it? But also, are you adept enough with a solution like this that regardless of where in the world it comes from, that you can set it up securely? That's why we make all of these guides here on the channel. That is why when we talk and compare all of these brands, name of the website, that we do so not only on a hardware level, but on a software level too. So do keep all of that in mind. And I really, really look forward to talking to you guys about this in the comments, because particularly in 2025, there is a whole discussion about imports and exports going on that, frankly, a lot of users are having to bear in mind when looking at products coming out of the East. Not just China, I'm talking the whole of the East. But again, I'll see you in the comments below. And again, there are links to all of the products I talked about linked in the description below. So if you found this video helpful, and if you were going to buy those products anyway, make sure those two things are true. Please use those links in order to do so. It results in a small commission coming here to me and Eddie, the NAS Compares, and it allows us to keep doing what we do. We weren't paid by any brand for this. We're rarely paid by any brand for any video, and when we do, we say it at the top of the video. But those commissions help us keep doing the kind of videos we do, and we thank you for it. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.